Do you find it difficult to write good stories for your B2 first exam? From the title to the right structure, the right grammar and the right expressions. There are so many things you need to keep in mind. It can get a little bit overwhelming, can't it? But don't worry, I'm here to support you. In this video we are going to look at all the key elements of a good story. And by the end of it, writing stories will feel much easier. Hi and welcome to Teacher Phill, where I help people like you pass their Cambridge exam. I think that stories are a lot of fun because the tasks are quite open and you can use all your creativity. Of course, when you have all that freedom, it's also quite easy to get lost, and this is something we really have to be careful with. As you know, with great power comes great responsibility. But first of all, let's have a look at a typical story task. You should always try to get as much information out of the task as possible. To do that, you can ask yourself these three questions here. What is the topic of the story? What exactly do I need to include? And who is going to read my text? The first question is really straightforward, and you can find the answer to that question by looking at the first sentence that is always given in the task. In our example, the story needs to be about someone named Jerry who received an email and decided to go to the local shopping center. All we get is a name and a little bit of a kickstart to the plot, but that's it. The second question is a little bit more specific and goes into more detail. But again, let's have a look at our example and let's see what information we can extract from the task. The very first thing we have to include is the sentence about Jerry and the email. There is always a sentence which must be used as the very first sentence of your story. Don't forget it or change the sentence. Start your story with it as it is. There are, however, two more ideas that you always have to write into your story. In this case, we must include a request and a present. The role these things play in your story is completely up to you, but they should play a central role and be important parts of the plot. The third and final question always looks at the reader of your story. Remember that in your Cambridge exam, you never write to the examiner or for your teacher, like me, but the reader is always specified in the task. Here we write for the readers of an international magazine for teenagers, which means that teenagers from different countries are going to read your story. B2 First for schools is designed for candidates in that age group, so we are writing for peers, we could say. And therefore, we can use rather informal language. Remember, every story task looks similar, and you can get the information that you need from the same places in each task. Just remember the three questions, try to answer them, and you are good to go. If we want to put our story in a good structure, we can simply look at all the stories ever written in the history of humankind, and I would guess that around 99% of them look the same. Every good story has a beginning, a main part, and an ending. At the beginning of our story, we obviously put that first sentence that is given in the task, but we need to add a little bit more information. Think about how Jerry might have felt in that situation, perhaps about things that were happening in the background, or things that had happened before Jerry received the email. The main part is where the magic happens. It includes the main events of the plot, and the story progresses the most. Last but not least, the ending concludes the plot and, as the name suggests, ends the story. Of course, you could now just start to write your story, but as you can guess, that is not good enough for me. I'm a big fan of making a plan first. In your plan, you can organize your ideas and already think about some good language that you can use in your story. My plan for our example story looks like this. Just from my plan, you can already guess what the story will look like, even though I didn't add a lot of information. Making the plan took me about 3 minutes. But now I only need to connect the dots and get started. So always make a plan and you can thank me later. You're welcome. Now let's put my plan into practice and let's get started with the beginning. As I mentioned earlier, the beginning fulfills 2 different tasks. First of all, it introduces the reader to the main character or characters of the story. And secondly, it sets the scene. That means that we can include some background information as well as some previous events before the actual main events even start. One of the main criteria of writing a story in B2 First for schools is the correct use of narrative verb forms. These are different past verb forms, and each of them has a very specific purpose. For example, we use the past simple to talk about the main events of a story. So most of your story will be written in the past simple. The past continuous is there to describe things that happened in the background or that were in progress at the same time as the main events. The past perfect simple and continuous talk about actions and situations that happened before the main events. I know all of this sounds really complicated, but believe me, with a little bit of practice, you will get a lot better at this. If the names of these verb forms don't ring a bell at all, then you should definitely look into them. Because they are not only important for story writing in your Cambridge exam, but also for other parts of the test, like reading and use of English or speaking. You can get in touch with me completely for free if you feel that you need some help. Simply book your first meeting with me and we can talk about your needs, your goals, and how I can help you achieve them. Just follow the first link in the description and I really look forward to talking to you soon. But now let's get back to the beginning of the story. So apart from narrative past verb forms, we also want to make sure that the beginning is really interesting and engaging to the reader. So we want to use, for example, some adjectives and adverbs and other useful expressions. You can see here, for example, that I gave my story a nice title. Every good story has a title, so yours should have one as well, but don't worry too much. It can be short and it doesn't have to be anything amazing. Just make sure that you include one. I also used a mix of verb forms, you can see them highlighted in blue, to show the main events, background actions and things that had happened before the main storyline. On top of that, I included a few adjectives and adverbs which help make the story come to life. You can see those in red. Keep these things in mind when you start your story and you will be off to a good start. The main part of the story is what the name suggests. It is the most important part that includes the most important pieces of information. Here we find most of the main events and the plot progresses from the beginning to the ending. Your focus in the main part should lie on putting all those events in a logical order while keeping the reader engaged and interested. To achieve this, once again, you want to use the correct past verb forms as well as some adjectives and adverbs, but there are also some other things you can do to achieve this higher level of engagement. Okay, so let's have a look at this step by step. First and foremost, if you take a step back and read the paragraphs without paying attention to all the colorful stuff there, you will see that there is a logical and chronological progression. Jerry leaves his house, has a flat tire, makes it to the shopping mall and runs into the family. The girl gives him the paper and he leaves. I guess all of that makes sense, but I still use certain expressions of place and time, which you can see in orange, that support this idea, and that there is a sequence of events. Just some little words, like before or next, can make it so much easier for the reader to follow the story, so make sure you use them. Another feature that we haven't discussed yet is direct speech. You can see it in green. By using direct speech, we can bring the characters to life, and the reader can identify with them more easily. Finally, I continued with good and engaging past verb forms, again in blue, as well as adjectives and adverbs, you can see them in red, which bring color and life to the things and people I describe. The very last part of every amazing story is a good ending. The ending ties everything together and brings the story to a conclusion. It is really your decision if you want to give your story a happy ending or a sad ending. The most important thing is that you end the story in some way. I tried to bring a little surprise to the ending of my story and turn Jerry's terrible day into a good one. You can find the different stylistic features I used in different colors again. Past verb forms are blue, direct speech green, expressions of place and time orange, and other interesting language and punctuation red. Don't just stop being awesome towards the end of your story. Stay consistent and use good language throughout the whole text. That's what the examiners want to see, and that's exactly what you will give them if you follow my tips. So the next thing you need to know is some useful expressions that examiners want to see when they mark your story. In the full article on my website, for example, you can find some great examples of all the different language features that I've talked about in this video. And in this video right here, you can learn how to write amazing reviews in B2 First and continue on your journey with me. I'll see you there in a second.